Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. I'm Holly Gibson, product specialist here at UDA Technologies, joined by my colleague Jordan Davis.
Hi, everyone.
And for today's workshop, we're going to talk about daily logs and time tracking with ConstructionOnline Mobile. So we'll be looking at the tools available to you and your field team on the ConstructionOnline mobile app. We'll talk a little bit about the importance of this type of documentation and really how you can get accurate information from your field team and how to make it easy for everyone on your team to contribute through their phone. So we'll look at things like how to make daily logs from the field, how to add photos to those logs. We'll look at how your team can clock in and out using the time clock in ConstructionOnline, and even do things like add pictures and notes, take breaks, document lunch times, things like that. And then we'll also take a look at how you then can access this data in ConstructionOnline and do things like not only see it, of course, but also things like how you can make reports or really use it in different ways throughout the life of the project. So we're really excited to dive in with ConstructionOnline daily logs and time tracking and go through some of the great things that you can set your team up to do.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to go ahead and pull everyone's attention away from this awesome map we have set up here for the moment. Look back over to the GoToWebinar panel. If this is the first webinar that you have joined with UDA Technologies, let me be the first to say welcome. We're really excited to have you here with us in our Lunch and Learn session today. We're going to be covering a lot of best practices, but also some unique tips and tricks for setting up the ConstructionOnline platform for your employees and for your team to be able to really easily track their time and keep documentation on what's happening on site. We're going to be deep diving into the mobile app today. Very excited to cover these items with you. But first, before we jump in, take a look at the questions panel. For today, we want to know what is the biggest struggle that you have currently with your field teams in terms of either tracking their time or tracking what's happening on site. Let us know what the biggest difficulty you're facing is today, this week, or this year. And we'll tailor the webinar somewhat to show you how you can address that. So go ahead and send us your question or what your biggest challenges are, and we'd love to dive in. Now, along the way, if other questions come up as we're working through, our colleague Sydney Dorsey is going to be joining us on the keyboards, flagging questions, answering briefly if she can, and also telling Holly and I what you're asking or trying to keep us up with the best questions that are coming in. So as we move through today, please send us your questions. And without further ado, let's jump right in.
Yeah, let's jump in. Well, I think this is such a great topic. I've been really looking forward to this workshop because, if any of you guys out there are, new to UDA Technologies, we provide project management software and have been doing so for the last 20 years. So really an industry leader on the project management front, serving over 700,000 customers. And one thing that we see across the board as people are getting started using ConstructionOnline or looking at what their options are really to better manage their projects is often addressing that communication that is happening between the field and the office. It's such a common thing that we see pretty much all the time. And so I've been excited for this workshop to really dive in and show you guys how that communication can happen and really some super easy ways to make that communication happen. As we're looking at the screen here, so Jordan has brought up this beautiful map for us, which is, part of what we look at from the results standpoint. We want to be able to see that visibility from where, what our employees are doing in the field, what are they working on, where are they located. And so before we dive into some of the reporting options that you'll have, we want to take a look first at how your field team is actually going to be entering this information. So we're going to jump over to the mobile app, really just to walk you guys through what you or anyone else who's in and out of the office can do with ConstructionOnline Mobile in terms of this documentation.
Yeah, so we thought that it would be a great idea to focus in on the mobile app first today because, we've done a lot of webinars recently showing off the web component of ConstructionOnline, but really the information flowing in a lot of ways is going to come directly from the ConstructionOnline mobile app. Now, the mobile app, it's really easy to find and access. This question comes up all the time Holly, in training sessions that I do, and I'm sure it comes up for you as well. But it's the app is part of the subscription. It's free. It's not an additional add-on or anything like that. And you can download it from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, looking just for Construction Online, one word. The goal of our mobile app is to make it incredibly easy and straightforward for your field teams to not only track their time and enter logs from the field, but also to do things like see project information, check and update files and upload photos into your projects. It can do a lot of very powerful things, but we worked incredibly hard to make sure the interface is simple and easy to use, and I think you're going to see that as a running theme as we talk through today.
As we dive into, I think this is a great time to just talk a little bit about the importance of this type of documentation. We want to make it easy for your team, partially because, of course, it's always great when it's easy, but partially because it's such an important component. You can get to the end of a project, get a couple of years down the road, you're likely not going to remember exactly what happened on March 4th at 12:08 p.m. That's unlikely. But if you can go back and pull a project log report from that day, see what was happening in the field, look at photographs and documentation, know who was clocked in for a particular job site, now you start to have the information you need for things that might be happening yesterday, but might be a couple of years away from it. In most cases for your projects, it's not like when the project ends, your involvement ends forever. If something comes up, you're going to need to be able to go back and look at that information. So you have that component, which can be a really huge protection for your business. And then you also have the component of being able to get visibility as a project manager or an office manager or a company owner, get visibility into what's happening on the job site without having to be there every single day. It's great when you can be, but very often you're not necessarily going to be on the job site. So we want to be able to have that visibility. You're able to see that with pictures, see that with the reports, and then very often take that information and in some cases, like with the project logs, report back to your clients in such a quick, professional way. So there's so many benefits to getting this information, both short-term and long-term. So that's really what we're going to look at with, project logging is, how easy it is to do that because the results are so powerful.
That's right. I mean, Ollie, I can rattle off a couple of examples of clients I've worked with this year and kind of at the tail end of last year who desperately needed to reference project documentation that either they had and they were thankful they had, so they were able to avoid a lawsuit or insurance claims, or they didn't, and they were in a really tough situation. I think we mentioned before the one company that let go of almost their entire field staff because no one had been documenting what was happening on site. Of course, everything came crashing down when they ended up losing an arbitration. I think, what was it, $400,000 plus?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Nightmare situation that could have been easily avoided if their team was using the daily logs feature. It's really not that difficult to use.
Well, I was just going to say, as we start talking about not being difficult, one of the things you'll notice on the screen here, so before we jump into the daily logs, is I do have pretty much all of Construction Online in the palm of my hand. So as you're looking at empowering your team, really there'll be a lot that they can do with the mobile app. We'll be focusing in on certain components today, but you can see that there's a lot for them to do. Common question would be, how do we make the app usage as foolproof as possible, easy to use so that people really don't have, a ton of extra options to dig through. So there are some great customization options on Construction Online Mobile that we'll take a quick look at before we jump into the logs. One is that you can move these icons around. So like you'll notice my time clock here is toward the bottom. If I wanted to use this every day and needed that to be at the top, I can just hold it down and then drag it up. And so you can really rearrange these so that the most important things maybe are at the top and everything else is a little bit further down. So super easy to customize. You also have some options within Construction Online settings. So your settings gear here in that top right corner that allow us to do things like control the size of the icons on the screen as well as turn features on and off.
Yeah, I almost always recommend if you have the ability to, or your company is handing out company-owned devices to your field teams to consider turning off features that they just don't need access to keep your team focused on the things that they should be doing every day, so they don't have to hunt through all the different icons and all of the different features. Now, as you continue to expand usage, or as people in your team become more familiar with the platform and know what they can do with Construction Online, you can always go back and turn these features back on. But we can see now, just by removing a few different options, how much more focused the app becomes, and really how much more of a tool and asset it can be for your field teams, as opposed to something they just have to do every day.
So let's jump into how easy it is to create the daily log. So you'll notice that I've turned off a good number of options here. I've left a few, so I've still got files and pictures, my to-do list, and of course my time tracking and daily logs. If I'm in the field and need to go ahead and begin entering in this information, you would just, of course, tap on the selection. So we'll just select the daily logs, and then you'll notice that I'm prompted to choose a project here. So daily logs are always going to be associated with a project or a specific job. So we're going to need to make that selection here if we haven't done so already. So we'll just choose our lowest project. And now I would be able to see any logs that were already entered for today's date. Since I haven't done that yet, we'll go ahead and just get started entering some information.
Yeah, it's really straightforward. There's a gigantic plus button in the bottom right. Some people have asked how to add a new log. I just want to point out, the add button at the bottom will take you to the first of the choices that you have, which is to choose a logging type. Now, you can see that our daily logging function has a number of different log types, anything from a work log to tracking a material log, to tracking visitors that might come on site. Now, we could go through and talk through the different log types, but I'll tell you right now, the most common and probably the most useful logs for companies that are getting started with a daily logging feature are going to start really with the work logs, any project notes that you might want to post, and observed weather delays. We'll touch on each of these. We're starting with the work log first, and this is really detailing what work was done on site, or what's happening on site today at this moment. When you open up a work log, one of the first things you'll want to set is, well, who is this work log about? In almost every case, I recommend that the person posting the log should set themselves as the log poster, unless this is some type of superintendent or maybe site super, and they're documenting work that's being performed maybe by a subcontractor. It's a pretty flexible tool. When you're just getting started, it's much easier for individual team members to just post what they did or what they're observing on site. You could see, as Holly was running through, there's a few different field options of setting things like resource types, and that's really, what type of work does this person do, or if it's, yourself, it's not a required field, so you don't really need to post that. But you can see you have a number of different options to track what's happening on site at this point. A couple of other contexts or things you can do with work logs. I'm always a huge proponent of posting at least one photo whenever you're setting up a new work log. That way you can show visually what's happening on site. That kind of goes along with the text. Now, it's not required, but I do think it's a great idea. And it's a very straightforward process. Once you've actually set up the resource name, all you'd have to do is tap on the photos icon to switch over and to kind of enter into the photo edition mode. And again, just like creating a new log, all you need to do is tap the plus icon, where you could then either upload pictures you've already taken, or you can take a photo on the spot. Very, very straightforward process. You can add more than one picture to a daily log. Here's our desk. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the office. And then you can see, we'll just wait for the photos to upload, and once it's finished, this screen will close down, and now we're ready to post a new work log with a photo attached. Couldn't be easier. Another thing that I'm a huge fan of recommending is using not only the typing tool here, but also, Holly, if you could open that back up, this functionality is the same on both Apple and Android devices. For people who say, I just don't like typing on my phone because my thumbs are too big, well, you can avoid this, or you can tell them that they're being difficult by tapping on the microphone icon, which you can see will start to transcribe. And it does a decent job. Now, I'm a little far away from the phone, but if you tell people to imagine that they're talking on the phone and reporting to you, just letting you know what's happening on site, This can really cut down on the time that it takes and the resistance that it takes when you're actually posting a new work log. I was talking with one of our clients who's also a business consultant, a construction business consultant, and he was telling us that with one company he was working with, that it took about 2 or 3 weeks to get people into the habit of posting logs daily, right? That's kind of in the name. The ideal situation would be that you're getting at least one update per day, right? But something that really sped up the process was when he showed a few field team members how they could actually just walk through and talk about what was happening on site during the day, noting any issues they might see or just what's been done. Attach a few photos with the combination of the microphone text-to-speech option or speech-to-text option and the photos attachments. They got in a really good habit, and now they don't ever have to worry about missing documentation on their projects.
Yeah, that's right. And one thing that starts to happen too with these logs is you'll notice that this information is starting to now build in real time. So I've entered a couple of work logs here. That could be something that I enter for myself or something that I enter for others. If I want to document some additional things, maybe we want to, enter some observed weather. So we're getting some pretty heavy rain here at the office this morning. So maybe I'll note, what time that started, what time it's ending, and whether or not there was any specific impact. So, with the project logging, we automatically are tracking and logging the weather for you in terms of weather conditions. This is really a place for us to assign a specific period of delay based on those weather conditions. So we could say, just delayed due to heavy rain or whatever additional notes or details might be pertinent here. So we'll get that note in. Thank goodness for autocorrect, right? And then we'll just save that. So now we have, a new type of log entered. And so you would be able to do the same thing throughout the day for, confirming things like material delivered to the job site. Here we might want to note not only what was delivered, but was the delivery on time? Was it as scheduled? Were there any damages? Were there any surprises with the delivery? So just a way to go ahead and get that information logged immediately. Now, sometimes this is a little bit different than the old method of waiting until the end of the day to fill out a longer form. So we wait till the end of the day, we come back and put in notes about what happened and do things a little bit more, perhaps the entire log at the same time, where we're kind of going back remembering. And you can certainly do that with Online logging for sure, but it's really set up to be fast and easy to do things more so in real time as they're happening, so you're less likely to forget details or forget to include something. We're just going to go ahead and snap a picture, create a quick log from that, add some notes, and we're done. And that way anyone on the team who needs to can receive an immediate notification as that log entry is posted. It's immediately available to everyone who's a part of that project on Construction Online, of course, with that appropriate permission level. And then, at the end of the day, usually there's nothing to do except maybe a couple of additional notes or something like that. But most of what's happening throughout the day on the job site is being logged, more so in real time.
Yeah, and kind of thinking back to that, the way that it used to be done, or the way that people typically had posted logs or written logs down in a logbook. I mean, they would wait to the end of the day because they had to write it down. So they had to stop, pull out a notebook, write out the information. It's a lot faster, like you were saying, Holly, to just get the information in now. It doesn't have to be perfect. The important component here is that it is being documented, right? That you do have a record of what's happening on site, whether it's good or bad. That way you're showing your due diligence, that your company is keeping track of certain items and addressing them in a timely fashion, as opposed to just burying your head in the sand and ignoring any site issues or things that could have been addressed earlier in the process.
Now, really, we can just continue to build up. A couple of other things to note here. Again, as Jordan mentioned earlier, there are different log types, so we're not going to go into each and every one of those, but the process to create them is really the same. We're going to choose to make a new log. We're going to go in and look at what type we want to create here. So you would just choose the appropriate type. Could just be general notes. We might look at a visitor log for someone who's on the site that day, or a delay log if there's a different type of delay that you're encountering. So all different types of things that you can do. And then the process to create that is always just going to be to do a quick fill out of the form, add a couple of notes, and really you're done there.
Yeah, and you'll notice there's a lot of similarities from log type to log type just in terms of the way that it looks and feels. And that's intentional so that when the team learns how to do post one log type, they don't have to relearn the entire interface for a different log type, because that would be a bit excessive. Now, something interesting that you can do in the mobile app that Holly was just showing off was in addition to creating a daily log directly from the logging feature, you can also convert or change any pictures that you take using the camera option and use that as an attachment or as the starting point for a daily log post as well. So, depending on which direction you want to move into posting a log, you can start with a log and then take a picture, or you can take a picture and use that to create a daily log. We thought that would be a really efficient way for teams to just quickly document something happening on site or something that they noticed that they wanted to quickly put into the system without having to open the log. So whatever feels intuitive or whatever pathway they take, the end result is still the same.
Yeah, that's right. So a lot of times when we look at different team members in the field, a good bit of what is helpful for them to be able to communicate is just that photo documentation. I mean, it's so nice to have the pictures. You're able to do that really very quickly. And so you'll notice on the mobile app there that the camera button is always visible. So if we're looking at the mobile app there, that camera option is always at the bottom. So we want to, again, make that a really easy thing for your team members to do. So no matter where you are in the app, you'll always have just along that bottom bar a link to go back to your tool set, as well as the camera, newsfeed, and game plan. So all they have to do is open the app, tap the camera button, go ahead and take a photograph or multiple photographs, and then hit that next button, and then they'll be prompted to say, well, what do we want to do now with these photos that we've taken? Do we want to just upload them as a file, which you can do? In that case, we'll just choose what folder it goes in, and they're just uploaded as photographs. Or do we want to use these to make a new daily log, in which case we'll choose that option, add the log type on. Couldn't be easier, enter the notes. You've captured the information with a little bit more detail, and now you can go back and do those reports.
Speaking of reports, I think I jumped the gun a little bit there, Holly. I'm sorry. I know you were trying to go to the camera. I was actually going to move back into the ConstructionOnline web portal now to actually show everyone kind of what we've been up to from the daily logging side and how that has all landed back inside of ConstructionOnline in pretty much real time. So as a quick overview, I've moved over to our company overview page, and I'm taking a look into the project tracking section where you'll find daily logging, and this is true both in the company overview and inside of any of your projects. Makes sense, any logs posted from the job site's tracking what's going on the job site, and what we can see is a stream of information of all the daily log posts. Of course, the most recent posts are going to show up at the top of the page here. But this is just a really good snapshot to show you what all is happening across all of your projects inside of ConstructionOnline. Now, if you wanted to filter down into a specific project, or maybe you wanted to see all logs by a specific person, you can use the filters option here to really drill down and see that directly from the company overview. Now, of course, the real, I think, location where people are going to land more often than not, though, is inside of a specific project in the daily logging function there, where you'll start to see posts appearing on the month view of the calendar. And this helps you see kind of in context what's happening across different dates inside of your projects. If you notice that there are multiple posts for one specific day, you might want to drill down and see, well, what's happening there? Why are there more log posts this Wednesday as compared to last Wednesday or this Friday? Like what happens, right?
Or you may want to look for where are there not those log entries. So the opposite, it might be that as you look, you notice that there's a day or two where there weren't any entries, and so you want to go back and ask, well, what happened, or why is that the case, or were we not on site that day? So it's great to be able to get that at a glance view. Now for this project, my 1752 Lois, it's a pretty new project. So this is the first day that I've entered any of those logs. You'll notice on the overview for the project, you'll be able to see how many total log entries there are. So we can see that from a pretty high level. Once you activate the location, we'll go ahead and start tracking the weather for you. So for this one, again, it's a new project, but I just enabled that weather track option. And so that's going to start building those weather logs for me from this moment forward. And if we want to look at some ways to make sure that our team is really going to remember to do these, even though the goal would be that, they're able to do that throughout the day and it's really easy to do. Sometimes we do want to give them a little nudge, so you can set up logging reminders, which is a really smart system. So if we wanted to set up a reminder for, maybe for Jim, so we'll set up a reminder for Jim. And what we'll do is really define what's required in terms of log types that we get from him on a daily basis. So we want to get maybe at least a work log and some project notes. Anything else that applies would be great, but every day I want to get at least this, and I want to get it or to make sure that he's entered those by, say, 6 p.m. So what will happen is every day at 6 p.m., our reminder system is just going to scan ConstructionOnline. We're going to look and see if Jim has entered a work log and project notes, and if he has, that's great, nothing happens. But if he has not, then he's going to get an email and or text message from our project team here, or from me in this case, that says, hey, please remember to post your logs by the end of the day. So it's just giving everyone on your team who needs it a little extra nudge or else here, or whatever you'd like to say in your message, just to make sure that those are being done consistently. Everyone forgets things, and if you guys are like so many clients that I work with, you're probably pretty busy, which is a really great thing, but those reminders will help to, keep you and or your team on track. So you'll be able to set those up.
Now, what's really intelligent about this system is that if Jim does post a work log and a project note before 6 o'clock, he will not receive this reminder, because what he already did what we asked him to do. Why would we remind him for something that he did, right? That's kind of what we mean when we say that it's a smart system. It's contextually based. So you'll notice this is set for the project 752 Lois. This might be his primary project, or this might be one of the projects that he's in charge of. So when you're setting up the logging reminders, do note that you'll want to set those per project. This is to make sure that people are being reminded specifically for the projects that matter the most to them.
So let's go back now that we've looked at logging, and you can see all of the detailed information that you can get here, and talk a little bit about logging and time tracking. So we want to show as well how easy it is to use the time clock system in ConstructionOnline. And a common question we get is, should we use logging, or should we use time tracking, or should we use both? And so of course that's always going to depend on your needs, although I do recommend that people use both systems. Time tracking is going to be intended for that particular employee to clock in and out. So that's really their daily time clock. They can add notes and pictures to document what they're doing. And in some cases that may be all you need. With project logging, that's something that can be done by each individual user or contributor, but is also often done by a superintendent who's maybe logging what they're observing others are doing, and includes more types of information on things like just general notes or delays or damages or incidents. Those are things that wouldn't normally be captured with a time clock system, but are going to be captured with the project logging. So you kind of have two different things going on there, and I really love to see people being able to take advantage of both and kind of use the unique benefits of both. Now, time tracking is also set up to be really, really just so easy to use. So you'll notice I have my time clock here on the app. And I can see that so far I have not clocked in yet today. So really the only next thing to do here is, again, try to make it as obvious as possible. So the first step to getting clocked in would just be to go ahead and hit that green clock in button right here on my app. So I'll go ahead and do that. Now, what will happen next is it's going to ask me, do I want to log in just kind of as a general clock in or select a specific project? And you'll notice that it's letting me know which projects I'm close to, so what's nearby, or I can go ahead and see a list of all of my projects. So if I'm close here to a couple of my Hamilton projects, maybe I'm here at Hamilton number 201, we'll select that. Now I'm clocked into that particular project.
Yeah, if you're curious about how that is happening, well, it's actually pretty straightforward. It's based on the address of the project and then making sure that the person's phone has GPS or the location services enabled. It's one of the first prompts that you'll see when you're getting started with the app itself. Really helpful to cut down on the scrolling or the search that people need to do when they're trying to find a specific project, especially if they're at the address for the project. It's a pretty nice update. I think it's going to be I think it's going to save a lot of seconds and minutes that will add up over time.
Well, we see many of you working on, some companies I work with are doing 5 projects this year, and they're just large jobs, and some companies I'm working with are doing 500. So you want to make sure that it's easy to get to those. So we try to use that GPS location in a couple of different areas. Of course, what we saw earlier on the map, and we'll jump back into that in a moment, is that as I'm clocking in, since I do have GPS enabled on my phone, it's capturing my location right now. As I'm clocking in, it will also capture that location as I'm clocking out. So that's going to be recorded. We can see exactly where I was when I clocked in. So it's great to have that information. We're also using it to help the user who's actually clocking in so they can see, quickly get to whatever jobs they're closest to. With that, you also will have the ability to set up alerts. So this is also something that we do based on the address. So if we go into the settings for the app, we can use a radius for the geofence and for nearby projects. So nearby projects are what appeared in that list. I am sitting in one office right now, so this won't happen. But as we're out in the field, maybe driving around to different job sites, the geofencing option will also give me an alert or notification whenever I enter the geofence for a project. So if I arrive on site at a different job, I'm going to get a notification that tells me, hey, you've arrived on site at your lowest project. Do you want to go ahead and clock into that, or do you want to switch over to that job? So it will do a great job there of notifying you when you arrive at different projects.
Yeah, it's a really great nudge for people to make sure that they're remembering to clock in. Of course, once they establish the habit, or once they understand, this is tied to my paycheck, they'll start to clock in more frequently. But it is nice to remind people so you don't have to go back and edit or add a manual timesheet for that employee because they forgot to clock in, which happens pretty regularly. Now, something that the employees can do when they're on site is post shift notes. There's some interesting things we'll touch on in terms of making the notes required versus not. That's up to you as an administrator. If you are requiring notes, the likelihood that they'll post the notes is 100%. If you're not requiring the notes, then while you can't guarantee that they will, you can ask. But if you really want detailed information flowing in, you probably will want to encourage that they post shift notes by making it required. But it's not a requirement to use the function, period. And the same is true for the photos as well. There's a couple of different ways you can use the notes and photos inside of the time tracking. But remember, keep in mind that this isn't designed and it's not intended to be used the same way that a daily log would be used. Now, when it comes to your company and your team, you have ultimate freedom in the way that you want the company to use the mobile app and to use the tools. What we found, though, is that the tools or the functions inside of the time tracking area of the app are more useful from an administrative and timekeeping standpoint and not so much from a daily logging standpoint. But we'll talk about how they go hand in hand.
They do. They really do go hand in hand. Now, you'll notice as we've been looking at some of the options that I've continued to add things like pictures and notes. One of the things that I really love about the time clock in Construction Online Mobile is that you can come back and add notes throughout the day or throughout the shift. So we've entered the notes. I can come back and continue to add, more notes here. And really just continue doing that as long as I'm clocked in. Now, when I'm ready to end, I can, of course, if I need to take a break, there's options for break. We're going to take a super fast break and go ahead and end that here. Same thing for lunch. We can go ahead and clock out for like a lunch break here. Or at the end of the day or the end of the shift, we could just use that clock out option. And now at this point, we're ready to clock in again the next day or for our next shift or the next, maybe after lunchtime or whatever it is that we're wanting to do here. So again, really easy to set up and use. And Jordan, like you mentioned, it does go hand in hand really with the daily logging to capture different types of information, give different people on your team the information they need. Time tracking, of course, is often tied to payroll, so we're really looking at exact numbers, and so that's what we'd be doing here. Now, a couple of options that you can set up from an administrative standpoint would be just some of the requirements for what we want our team to do. So you can see here that I am no longer clocked in. I can see that I myself am not clocked in. We've got some employees on the clock here. You'll also notice that in the area where we're looking at our timesheets, we have some settings. So that's going to be located here in this menu. And there are a couple of things that you can do. Normally, to start using time tracking, one of the first things you'll want to do is just set up your company's pay period settings and overtime, how you want that to be displayed and calculated. This is something that you would normally only set up once, and you as the administrator would come in and do that just to make sure that the pay period reports that you run are going to start and end on the correct date. But really where it gets fun for our field team is to be able to come in and enter some requirements. So we can turn on an option that it activates an option where employees have to enter notes before they can clock out or change to another job. So if we always want to make sure that we're getting those notes, again, this is such an easy way for people to be reminded of that because they really won't be able to clock out. When they hit that clock out option, and we'll show you what that looks like in a moment, they'll be prompted to enter the notes. Same thing for cost code. So if you really want employees not only to log into specific projects, but maybe specific cost codes within those projects, this would be where that option, that requirement can be turned on so that they will be prompted to do that and actually won't be able to log out until they've done those things. Here is where also there are settings for things like breaks and lunches, whether lunches should be 60 minutes or 30 minutes. It'll give them a countdown timer on that when they clock out, so they'll be able to see how much time is left, and you'll also be able to designate paid and unpaid for those. So we know that looks different in different companies. So this will affect how those lunch and break times calculate into their total hours for the day, while still allowing you from a compliance perspective to track that they actually did take it, even if it's time that they will get paid for. So a lot of great options there. Now, if we go back to the mobile app, having turned these options on and clock in again, we'll start to see that as we clock in, everything looks normal. But if we try to clock out with these new settings in place, it's just really going to let me know, hey, you've got to add a note to this timesheet before you clock out.
I can almost guarantee someone's going to do this. Just keep an eye out for people who get a bit snarky with the notes. It's really, again, it's supposed to be used together as a team. If someone is doing something like this, when you can't really control that other than to tell them, hey, don't do this anymore. But once a note is posted, or once they actually type in a note, then they'll be able to clock out. as well.
That's right. Now you'll notice that we weren't prompted on the cost codes for this one, and that's because this project doesn't have any cost codes assigned. So again, smart reminders and systems that don't get in your way if it doesn't apply, but do make the tools a little bit more useful for cases where it does. So maybe we'll select this residence here. So now we'll see that new cost code option appear in my form. And so if we try to clock out now, it's going to let me know first that I've got to choose a cost code. So I haven't done that yet. So we'll come in, choose a cost code, and we can either scroll through our list or just start typing that in. So we'll do appliances. And then still we'll go ahead and get the prompt to enter the node. So it will catch us and make sure that we're really filling these out the way that you or your payroll team needs to be able to really work with the information or get the most out of the information you're capturing here. Now, just like with the notes in your daily log, you can use the mic option to enter those notes as well. So it does a great job of, capturing that information if you wanted to use the microphone instead of the keyboard.
Nice, not bad.
And we're done. So we'll clock out. I've entered all my required information. And now let's take a look at where this information is going to appear in Construction Online. So just like with logging, as we're using the time tracking, we do want to be able to come back in and now pull some reports based on that. So we can see that there are 6 minutes worth of time that I've been clocked in today, and I can see exactly how that breaks down. What was my location at each clock in and out. You'll see indicators just to let you know that there are in fact notes associated with with these timesheet entries here. And really kind of usually the big question is, when it's time to do payroll, how can we get this out as a report? And so there are some really great options to export the timesheets either as a PDF report or an Excel sheet. And you can get some really great information here.
And so starting with where to find the reports, if you look over underneath the time tracking categories on the web view, you'll see an option for time tracking reports. If your screen is a little smaller and you don't actually see the text labels, just know it's the third option here. If you hover, by the way, this comes up from time to time. If you hover over the icons, you'll be able to see which is which. And that's going to be the third option here. And you'll see you have a few different ways of actually pulling the information out from the platform itself. Now, of course, there was the table view we were looking at that lets you just quickly see, summarized views of time that was tracked this week, or depending on which pay period setting you wanted to take a look at, you could switch through that. But you also have a few different ways of pulling out these time punches, whether you wanted to look from a project perspective or from an employee perspective. Now we can start with the project summary just so we can get an idea of what that would look like. Now you can see there's a few options of selecting the date range. Oftentimes you'll probably select the current pay period if you just wanted to quickly pull the information out. Or you can continue to scale out depending on what information you're looking for. Now this information is going to be pulled together centered around the project as the filter for the time that we're looking at on the report, which we can see really is not too much because this is a new project, right, as we mentioned earlier today. Now, if we switch back over and we pull an employee time summary, though, we will be able to select a specific person and pull all of their information out of the system, not filtered by a specific project, but by really everything that they've been tracking for the past, let's say, week, 2 weeks, depending on your pay period settings, or depending on the time range or the date range that you set. Now, what I think is probably the go-to export or the go-to report that I've seen recently, especially for those people who are looking at taking and then manipulating the information from Construction Online, has been the export option to pull it out into a spreadsheet. There's a lot of different things you can do with spreadsheets. We're not going to go into that today. But you'll notice that in this export format, you have a few different filters that you can choose. But you don't have to select any filters at all. You can export all of the time tracked entries for all of your employees for all of your projects, which is a very useful function. And from this point, we'll be able to see or set the date range, and you'll have another option here to include a detailed timesheets. Now this is going to break down line by line by line everything that we were looking at in the time summary. It might make more sense not to export the detailed timesheets if you're just looking for the total hours per week or per day.
Yeah, so I mean, a ton of great options there. Now, on the reporting front, a couple of things too to know is that we are actually adding in some new reports that you'll start to see next week to give you some additional summary options. So the reports here are really going to give a great breakdown on a per employee basis or a per project basis. We're actually adding in a company time summary or totals report, which will be a report that will list, each employee in the company, how many hours they worked for that pay period, and how many of those were overtime hours, and that's it. So if you need a really high level report for payroll, that is something that I know a couple of you guys had requested, really just because when it's time to, usually when it's time to do the payroll or issue the checks, sometimes we need the detail if there are different rates involved, but very often we don't. We just need that total information, and so you'll have a way to go ahead and pull that out as well. Now, it looks like we are approaching the end of our time. We have got about 10 minutes left for the webinar today, and I noticed that there have been a ton of great questions coming in, so I thought it would be great if we would take a moment just to look through those. It looks like Sydney has done such a fantastic job of answering those quickly for you guys, but she has also flagged several for us to take a look at. Let's see. Do you have a question about whether or not the time tracking reports include notes and pictures? So they will include those notes on the exports that you're doing there. Not every report will include them, but the exports are going to show the pictures for you. We're also working on a really nice new feature for time tracking specifically, which will be a photo stream option. So currently in daily logs, and in punch lists, there is a photo stream option that basically breaks out all of the pictures that were taken as part of the logs or punch list for that project, and gives you a way to just see all the photographs in one place. And so we're actually adding that photo stream option in for the time tracking as well. So you'll have, even a different way to come in and be able to see all the pictures at one time. And then those are either already included or being added to the reports that you've got available. Now, let's see. We have had a couple of great questions too coming in about whether or not we have plans to add an integration with QuickBooks here for time tracking. So that is definitely something on the map for time tracking, is to give you a way to include that as part of that QuickBooks integration. So that's something that we are kind of planning to do, something that is on the map. I will say that QuickBooks, if for those of you that are using desktop versions of QuickBooks, they do offer import capabilities, and so what we've seen is that a lot of people will take those hours and put them in QuickBooks, or very often that they're also just using a different third-party payroll that might be a plug-in, or something that they're using alongside QuickBooks, but really the payroll portion of it is a third party. And so very often you can import the timesheets from Excel right into those systems. So don't underestimate the flexibility that you already have with just those simple Excel or CSV export options right now. We did have a couple of questions here just from people who were kind of wanting to know about users and how that works. So that this is a good time, I think, to bring up as well with the time tracking specifically. The users who are able to use the time clock are going to be your company users. So if you don't have everyone in the company already in the system and you want to start using the time clock, you will need to make sure that you add them into that company user list or company employee list, which is really easy to do. If any of you guys are on some of our legacy plans, maybe for Construction Online, where you have a limited number of users, be sure to reach out. All of our plans now do include unlimited users, so you can go ahead and pull those employees in for things like the time tracking. So definitely, give us a call if you want us to look at the account with you and kind of figure out what's going to be the best way to get everybody on board. Yeah, great questions and a great variety of questions. So maybe we can just touch on a couple of these. It looks like that someone out there wanted to know if you could enter in custom cost codes. So looking at that clock in for the cost codes or the cost code designation on the project logs, you definitely can. So we provide you with both the CSI and NAHB cost code sets. So you'll have that 17 division set from CSI as well as a set from NAHB already loaded into your account, but you can import or create your list of cost codes for your company if you want to make a new cost code list. That is something you can do, and you can use that as your primary cost code assignment for projects that you're creating.
Yeah, making custom cost codes is really, really, really straightforward. There's even a quick add mode, so if you just wanted to get into the groove of typing out, well, we need let's say this is going to be foundation, framing, and you can just keep rolling down the list and entering in the different codes as you would like. Now, if you wanted to take it to a little more complex setup, you can add in top-level divisions, which would act as those folders that we saw before, so you could nest the codes. Now, in my experience, it's a lot easier for field teams to clock into straightforward cost code lists or cost code sets. I was actually speaking with a few of our clients at the International Builder Show a couple of weeks ago, and they'd set up a really effective system where they had a few different cost books for different project types that they worked on, but there were only maybe 10, 15-ish cost codes per cost book, and then they just assigned the correct cost code set or cost book to the corresponding projects, and they were able to get a really robust time tracking system in place for different rates on different projects from that set of about 10 or 15 cost codes. So if you're interested in talking through strategies for setting up cost codes, we'd love to talk with you about that and see what is going to make the most sense for your team and really the information that you're trying to track.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, we did have a couple of questions as well, so I think we've got time for one or two more. Just really quick things to touch on. We did have a couple of questions about enabling access to things like the camera or GPS location. Do know that usually with the mobile app, just like many of the apps that you use, the first time that you encounter a place in the app where we need the permission to access either the camera or the location, the user will be prompted to turn that on. So for example, GPS requires motion and fitness access. So I've got that turned on now. But if I did not, and I tried to set up, say, maybe the geofencing, it would ask me, hey, do you allow access for would you allow this app to access your motion and fitness information? Interesting that Apple calls it motion and fitness as opposed to GPS, but hey, that's what they, that's how that's set up. Same thing with the camera. The first time you download the app and get ready to start maybe using the camera, you'll be, prompted to allow that access. So you always want to, of course, say yes. Jordan, like you mentioned earlier, especially if these are company provided devices, you probably just want to go ahead through that setup before handing those off to your users. But usually it's a really quick prompt, and then you do just go ahead and choose yes to give that access. So it's really easy to set up.
Yeah, if they say no to the prompts, and then they later on say, well, when I tap the camera, the screen is blank and it's not, the camera isn't showing up. or they try and upload files or photos and there's something that says you can't do that right now, or you can't access photos at the moment. It'll be pretty clear and pretty apparent if their permissions aren't set like this, given what they're experiencing, right? It's either one of two things: either the camera or the phone itself, something's off about the phone, which is highly unlikely, or the more likely scenario is they just didn't approve the app to do something when they were first setting up. Yeah, and I do think it's interesting that the motion and fitness option now is what they're titling the kind of like the location data, because there's also location, but this was prompted, this happened, Holly, when you turned on the geofence settings. So I think it's just like noting where you are relative to locations on the device or on the map, which is you'd think they would just roll that into the location field, but hey, they got to do things differently.
Right. Well, and the app makes it easy. Whatever it is that access is needed, it'll prompt you that way. So super easy to set up. Let's see. I think that wraps up. You guys have given us a lot of really fantastic questions today. It does look like most of them have been answered, and many of them are pertaining to specific situations, which is a good time to say we love that. So if you think it would be beneficial to work with either Jordan or myself or one of our other product specialists directly, please do not hesitate to reach out. We can be reached here at 800-700-8321. So you can just give our office a call, and any of our product specialist team would be happy to work with you or talk about some specific scenarios and look at great solutions for you and your company. You can always reach us by email as well. That's info@uda1.com. And we hope that you will keep up with our future workshops and recordings of previous sessions. Those are going to be available on our events page. So that's just udatechnologies.com/events. So you'll be able to see a replay of today's workshop along with other previous workshops that we've done and the schedule of upcoming events. We do have a great session scheduled for next week on Thursday to look at the most powerful, really two-way QuickBooks integration in the industry, and that is offered by UDA through our Socket tool. So it's really allowing you to connect that ConstructionOnline web-based software and a powerful, really deep integration with a QuickBooks desktop. And then we'll also revisit Lunch and Learn in 2 weeks, where we'll be taking a look at increasing sales with lead and opportunity tracking. So really the sales management section, creating those leads, doing your follow-ups, getting proposals out the door, managing those potential projects. So that and then several more will be coming on deck soon as well. So a lot of great workshops coming up. We hope you can join us for those in the future as well.
And as always, thank you so much for spending your lunchtime, or maybe some of you it's dinner time, or some people around the world it's just the middle of the day.
Maybe
not really
like
a special
brunch,
time at
yeah.
all. Seriously though, thank you all so much for joining us today to talk through, and thank you so much for your questions and your feedback. We always appreciate you joining us here. As always, we hope you have a great rest of your week, and hopefully we'll see you next week, next Thursday.